Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Taylor Tech Review. We got so much awesome stuff to cover today. We got SpaceX flying around in grain silos and landing astronauts, dark times ahead for Intel, the Twitter hackers got arrested, and more on Nvidia buying ARM. So let's get started. So we're going to blast right into the news today, and what better way to do that than by a blast-off, which is what SpaceX did with their SN5 prototype on Tuesday. This flight has been a year in the making. I didn't realize it at first, but it's been a year since the flying water tower, aka Starhopper, took to the sky. Well, something good finally came out of 2020, and now we've got flying grain silos. In case you're wondering why a rocket looks like a grain silo, let's do a rundown on SpaceX's new Starship. First off, what just flew was basically the engine, the gas tank, and all the plumbing, which is frankly the hardest parts of a rocket. Starship is the second stage of the rocket and will eventually be powered by 6 of the new Raptor engines. Now, SN5 only had a single Raptor engine, and SN6 is rumored to probably have 3 engines and will do a much higher hop. And later prototypes are going to keep on adding things like guide fins, a nose cone, payload area, etc., until it's all there and it's all been tested. Now, that's just the second stage. The first stage is called the Super Heavy Booster, and it will be powered by 31 of the Raptor engines. It's basically a hugely scaled up version of SN5. Way more engines, much larger fuel tanks. Now, the Super Heavy Booster will be about 230 feet tall, and Starship will be about 160 feet tall, with the whole rocket coming in at 390 feet or about 30 stories. Just imagine that rocket beside a 30-story building. Yeah, that's a big frickin' rocket. Now, what else is big news, though, is SpaceX's Dragon Endeavour landing off the coast of Florida on Sunday after 2 months in space. Now that it's back on the ground, NASA and SpaceX have to go over the Dragon capsule and all the data and see how well it held up to get it fully certified for operations to the ISS. But already another launch is planned for probably late September, and it'll be taking 4 more astronauts to the ISS, this time for a 6-month stint. After 9 long years, NASA finally has its own ride back to the ISS, ending its reliance on the Russian Soyuz spacecraft. And the good news just keeps on flying for SpaceX, because they've apparently had so many people register for Starlink that even though the beta test hasn't even begun yet, they've already had to go back to the FCC and request more satellite dish licenses. They were initially granted a license for 1 million satellite dish terminals, but they've already got 700,000 requests, so they had to go back and request the FCC to upgrade their license to 5 million instead. Now, a company statement said, quote, "Despite the fact that SpaceX has yet to formally advertise this system's services, nearly 700,000 individuals represented in all 50 states signed up over a matter of just days to register their interest in said services at Starlink.com. To ensure that SpaceX is able to accommodate the apparent demand for its broadband internet access service, SpaceX Services requests a substantial increase in the number of authorized units." Looks like lots of good times ahead for Starlink. Now, you know who doesn't have good times ahead? That would be the 3 defendants charged in the Twitter hack that took over 130 very high-profile accounts and used them to Bitcoin $117,000 in bitcoins from victims. Now, the hack was primarily done through social engineering, and if anything, it throws Twitter's poor security practices into the limelight more than it does any kind of network vulnerabilities. And network security is only as good as the weakest link, and the link here was, once again, the people and Twitter's training on them. Even the 17-year-old kid involved is getting charged as an adult. What do you guys think was going to happen with such a high-profile attack? No one was going to investigate? Do the crime, pay the time. We've also got an update from Bloomberg on Nvidia's interest in acquiring ARM, and it looks like Nvidia is hoping to close the deal in the next few weeks. Now, whether or not the deal gets approved by regulators is a whole separate issue, but if the sale is blocked, then there's always still the IPO option, which is apparently the option that ARM's co-founder Herman Hauser would prefer. He gave an interview to the BBC in which he stated, "The sale of ARM to Nvidia would be a disaster. It's one of the fundamental assumptions of the ARM business model that it can sell to everybody. The one saving grace about SoftBank was that it wasn't a chip company and retained ARM's neutrality. If it becomes part of Nvidia, most of the licensees are competitors of Nvidia and will of course then look for an alternative to ARM." But none of this may matter at all, because here's where the story gets really weird. Because apparently ARM has lost control of its Chinese joint venture unit called ARM China. In May, ARM fired the head of the Chinese unit, but apparently the guy just ignored them and kept on coming to work. He's even brought in his own personal security so nobody can get close to him. And then he went on and raised something like $10 million in private funding that he then dumped into a Cayman Islands account. With this much drama going on, Nvidia may make it a condition that ARM get their house in order before agreeing to any kind of deal. I know I would. And investors would be leery if ARM tried to go public while the Chinese subsidiary was still running around rogue and doing whatever it wanted. This is some Jerry Springer level drama, guys. Not wanting to be left out of the drama, of course, Intel is now being sued in a class action lawsuit alleging that they knew well before the second quarter earnings call that 7nm yields were in the toilet. Now this I can totally believe, because you don't just wake up one day and find out you're 6 months to a year behind schedule and, oh, look, nobody knew it. Huh, what a thing. I mentioned in my last video that TSMC's production is full, and it looks like TSMC has decided that Intel isn't worth making a big investment over. Intel can probably book enough capacity to make their Aurora supercomputer GPUs, but probably not a whole lot else. Certainly not their whole product lineup. We've also got some new Intel logos that were discovered. The only interesting bit in this is the Evo powered by Core logo, which might be what Intel is going to call Tiger Lake or Alder Lake. We'll have to wait for more info there. Now, Adored TV has gotten hold of some very interesting info, if true. But I'm really going to have to put this one in the rumor category until I see more sources on it. So take all of this with a huge grain of salt, guys. Basically, they're saying that things are looking really bad for Intel's GPU division. Of course, they're looking bad for every Intel division, so I'm not sure why they'd be any different. But they're stating that the Arctic Sound GPU has no design wins at all because it's a power-hogging master of nothing. They also said that Intel may lose the GPU portion of the Aurora supercomputer contract to either Nvidia or AMD because their Ponte Vecchio GPU is behind schedule. And just to make things worse, they also said that Raja Koduri, who runs Intel's graphics division, will be leaving in the third quarter, and that Z will be eventually canceled and the graphics division dissolved by 2023. Now, just remember again, this is far from confirmed, but if this is true, this will be the second time Intel has entered and left the graphics market in a few years. I don't know if any of you guys remember the Intel i740 from the late 90s. Take-Two had their quarterly earnings call recently, and during it, their CEO Strauss Zelnick was asked about $70 game prices for next-gen consoles, and he said, "We're definitely announcing pricing on a title-by-title basis, and I would just observe there hasn't been a frontline price increase for a very long time, although costs have increased significantly. Like I said before, guys, this is going to happen eventually, at least for all of the AAA titles that everybody wants to play. Indie titles will probably still be had for cheaper, but for all of the big releases, it is inevitable. Now, in our last bit of news, we've got a report from Electric that Chinese EV maker Candy will be bringing 2 models to the US market. The Candy 27 is a subcompact with only basically a 17.7 kilowatt hour battery pack, which I doubt will even get close to 100 miles. But it does start at just $20,499, and after federal tax credits, that goes down to about $13,000. The Candy 23 will feature a much larger 41.5 kilowatt hour battery pack, which should give it about 180 miles of range, and it starts at $30,000, but with the electric vehicle incentives, the price should again come down, this time closer to about $20,000. Electric does make a very good point at the end of the report when they stated, "It will be interesting to see if the U.S. government continues to outlay $7,500 each for these in addition to state incentives. That is approaching half the total price of these vehicles, while domestic players like GM and Tesla have to sell at full price." I'm pretty sure that Big Auto is going to be talking to their lobbyists about this if they haven't already. They're not going to let that stand. And that's going to wrap things up for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and if you liked this video, I would appreciate it if you would smash the like and subscribe buttons, because it really does help with the YouTube algorithm. I'm going to leave you guys with another clip from Hubble. I love these. This time it is Hubble zooming in on the pillars of creation. Until next time, take care, guys.